What's up, guys? Welcome.
Is it in the joint?
Went on to say, I really hate.
Thinking about astronauts.
I have to deal with this every single day. YouTube.
Opening YouTube for Android TV.
He leaves behind family, friends, fellow Marines, and a grateful nation.
On March 21st, 2021.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another one of my eat-bros, and in this eat-bro I am going to be doing this flight right here from YMHB to NZQN, so yeah.
The container ship Ever Given on its journey between the port of Tianjin Helipas and Malaysia.
For some reason, they didn't put me at a gate, so yeah. Put on ice and pass.
In Rotterdam in the Netherlands when it was sailing through the Suez Canal in Egypt. According to the shipping company, the vessel was hit by a strong sandstorm with wind speeds up to 74 kilometers an hour, causing it to no longer be steerable. At 7:40 a.m. local time, the ship ran into the side wall of the canal. About half an hour later, the first Egyptian tugboats and firefighting ships arrived, but freeing the ship will prove to be a difficult undertaking. The first images began to circulate on the internet and show that the ship has dug itself into the side wall, and satellite images reveal how the ship is completely blocking passage through the canal. The Ever Given is a type of ship that can carry a maximum of 20,124 containers, which makes it one of the largest container ships in the world. To make the size clearer, here is a person for comparison. Here is the Titanic, and here is the Empire State Building in New York, laid on its side. Early attempts to free the ship with tugboats alone did not lead to success, and excavators began trying to free the ship. The profile of the Suez Canal is angled on the sides, which means it only has its full depth in the middle.
A fleet of tugboats trying to free the Ever Given. President Biden says the U.S. is ready to assist.
Dutch firm Smith Salvage and Nippon Salvage from Japan have been brought in to rescue the Ever Given.
Salvage crews have been working round the clock at the moment, concentrating on digging tons of sand out from under the ship's bow and stern.
The stern of the vessel is now free, and the Egyptian authorities say they're hoping higher tides and the arrival of more tugboats on Sunday will help their operation.
The artificial canal connects the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. For the busy trade routes between the Indian Ocean and the North Atlantic, the canal cuts travel times for container ships by around 8 to 10 days, as the only alternative is to circumnavigate the entire African continent. The canal is an important source of revenue for Egypt. The country receives more than $5 billion annually through transit fees, which in turn means that the average price per transit is over $300,000. One limitation, however, is that a large part of the route can only be shipped in a single lane. Therefore, traffic has to alternate between north-traveling and south-traveling ships. There are waiting areas, such as in the Great Bitter Lake, where ships can hold for traffic and where they have the opportunity to turn around if necessary. Since 2015, due to the construction of the new Suez Canal, a larger part of the canal has 2 lanes and is therefore navigable in both directions at the same time. However, there is only a single lane where the Ever Given is stuck, which means all traffic on the canal has come to a standstill. Over the course of the blockage, about 370 ships were waiting for passage on both sides of the canal, and it is estimated that every day this incident held up goods worth $9.6 billion. The uncertainty about how long the blockade will last makes it difficult for shipping companies to decide whether it makes more sense to wait until the canal is clear or to send their ships on the way to the Cape of Good Hope on the southern tip of Africa. Some have made this expensive decision, including the Ever Greed, the sister ship of the Ever Given that blocks the canal. Both ships are operated by the shipping company Ever Green. Such a situation is particularly critical for ships that have livestock on board, for which there is not enough water and food for extremely long delays. And the blockade came at a very unfortunate time, as global supply chains are already operating at their limit.
Cats like their bodies scorching hot. Not literally scorching hot, but they like environments between 70 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. This is due to their desert ancestry. Cats have a high thermoneutral zone. I don't even know what the thermoneutral zone is. Okay, I just looked it up and it says it's the temperature range where they can maintain their normal body temperature without expending additional energy. That's crazy. Between 86 degrees and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But the point is, cats like it hot. And I knew this because my cat, Freddie Gary, love finding warm spots. This is him right now sleeping. Not really in a warm spot, so this isn't a good example. This isn't a good example either. He's just laying in our bed. Alright, sorry to wake you up, buddy. And obviously I want to do whatever I can to make my cats as comfortable as possible. When they're laying by the window and just a little sun peeking out, I'll open it up, let the sun blast on them, and they just, like, they love it. They're just like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. Kurt lays on our dishwasher, like on the counter above our dishwasher, because the counter gets warm. Gary lays by our shower when the shower's on, because
Call of Duty 11, Advanced Warfare. Sandwiched in between Ghosts and Black Ops 3, and also the third game in a row to be futuristic, with two more on the way before they decided to head back. Advanced Warfare has kind of been framed as the most mediocre title. People started to absolutely despise the direction Call of Duty was taking. Now, while the game scored well from critics, there's a clear division amongst all the people who played on higher than easy difficulty. And while the multiplayer is usually the highlight for most folks, so much so Black Ops 4 had the misfortune of having to exist, the campaign was riddled with heaps of quick-time events, dragged-out cutscenes, weird in-game cutscenes that glitched out the game, not to mention it was horrendously optimized on PC. So naturally, I played it on PC. However, I raised the argument. Mech suits. So I read the most mediocre Call of Duty. I don't know, dude, these older Call of Duty games, these are tough games. These are tough games. I'll see how it goes. Zero mission. Can't be all that bad. I think it's fine. This is finally starting to sink in. Everybody know what's going on? No. Everybody know what's going on? No. No. I didn't do the training. I was 6 nights in. Wait a minute. We were in the sky? Like, man, open me up against Dave. It's on the other side. What does that mean? That's far. I think they're adjusting our trajectory for us. Oh, everything's okay now, right? Wait, go through the ghost. It's no one piece. I'm only on episode 27. Let's see where we land. Hopefully not at McDonald's. Oh. Whoa. It's so pretty out there. Okay. Get on the ground and we got the middle team now. Hold on, but I have to turn off the throttle because that's very frustrating. Hold that ball forward. What? Can you push me? Wait, hold on. Okay, 1, 2. Double jump is good. I'm stuck. I can't. I'm not sure where I am. I need help. Where are my bullets? It's like puzzle. Protect me, man. There's so much. What are we doing there? The future is wild. Going up the bus. You cannot allow these men to use public transportation. Now, the tram? I'll be taking this. You can't get me thrown. I have it. Oh! I don't have cover. This rover takes me. Oh, where do I go? I don't know where to go. What do you think I'm doing? I'm actually thinking so many. Push it already though. There's so many. Get the MP, please. Yeah, right. You guys don't get to have fun on zip lines. What is this? Some kind of resort? Help, what's going on? Ouch! Who dropped that off me? Alright. Stay. Wait, you left the missionary, yeah? Oh, I see. We're just going to go this one. Okay. I'm trying! That's awesome.
This is King George's Do's and Don'ts Homer's Edition. Don't run.
They don't. I'm telling you.
The vast majority of the cosmos is voidless. Gigantic, unfathomably large spaces of empty nothingness. Bubbles of eternal night stretching hundreds of millions of light years, almost entirely devoid of galaxies, stars, or light. The loneliest places in existence. Voids are not just the absence of stuff, but weird.
I'm trying to platinum every game I own. The last COD game I did was World of War, and in this video, I'm doing it. Released in 2007 and developed by Infinity Ward, COD 4 was a genre-defining game for online FPS game. Being the first COD game I ever picked up, this game holds a special place in my heart. But there's a little problem. Because the game came out before trophies even existed, there is no platinum trophy. But in 2017, they released a remaster that has 51 trophies. And to get the platinum, we need to get the trophy deep and hard. We need to complete the entire campaign on Veteran. And we also need the trophy in Mile High Club, which is such a hard mission that I don't even have words for. Also, this is all streamed live over on my Twitch, so if you want to watch a few platinums live, go follow the Twitch. You get the first trophy, a Winged Dagger, for completing the first mission, FNG, where we get to meet... Take one of those right. Oh, yeah, let's knuckle this price. Okay, well, after learning the basics, we then get to meet Captain Price, who tells us...
So it's your turn for a CQB test. You have to run the cargo ship solo in less than 19 seconds.
Oh, I can beat 19. And if we beat 19 seconds, we get the trophy and new squadron record. And I mean, for a guy like me, 19 seconds is way too easy. Oh. Fuck, I'm back here! After learning the basics again, take it another shot. Oh, we're too slow. Oh no. Now 18.15 isn't a bad time, but some sweaty nerd over at Infinity Ward did it in 15.1. And if we beat that time, we get the trophy Best of the Best. There is no way I'm letting some dev beat me, a certified gamer. I missed already. What? Not fucking happen, bro. What the fuck? Did I not just fucking hit that? Am I not hitting the fucking targets? I'll let you know when I'm locked in. Fucking plot now! You're ready! Veteran is recommended. Alright? Earn a Winged Dagger. Another trip now. Fine in, we just started. With the first mission out the way and Veteran difficulty selected, we get the next trophy, Make the Jump. For completing the mission, Crew Expendable. We also get a trophy for Package for completing it on Veteran. We're placing the game Storm a Ship for a nuclear device. And I wanted to try and do the entire campaign without dying, and surprisingly, I survived the entire mission. I mean, shit, you can't complete the entire game without dying if you don't survive the first mission. We are in great shape right now. Make the jump. The package! This game's fucking easy. And it keeps getting easier with the mission Blackout, where we get the trophy Dancing in the Dark, and for doing it on Veteran, we also get the trophy The Rescue, where again, I was gaming and didn't even come close to dying. Holy! Okay, maybe a little close. But again, another mission without dying, I might actually be able to do this. Hey! Dancing in the Dark! The Rescue. Wait, is this ever gonna get hard? Famous last words. The next trophy to search, we get for completing the mission Charlie Don't Surf on Veteran. This is going to be another very easy mission without dying. Oh, okay. Alright, we died. First death. Yeah, if you thought I'd be able to do the Veteran campaign without dying, thank you for believing in me, but I died 4 times in this exact room, so we are definitely back. Moving through the mission, I accidentally got a really hard trophy. Four of a kind. What is that? Oh, what a tough trophy. Now, also in this mission, there is a missable trophy called Your Show Sucks, where you need to break every TV to let Alisar speak, which I, of course, completely ignored. But after only 3 deaths, we finished up the mission. Search. We get the trophy Save the Bacon for completing the mission The Bomb. Now, this mission has 2 missable trophies, with the first one being Rescue Rusowitz, where we have to save him from being gaming. Rescue... Oh, I had to rescue him? I had to rescue myself? He wasn't even a him! The other missable trophy is Field of Heat, where we need to use this javelin to destroy all 4 tanks that are on the bridge. Now, this is something that I thought I had to do for the mission anyway, so it's nice to get a trophy for it. Field of Heat? but after revisiting a classic COD format that nobody liked, we regrouped at the tank and finished the mission. Take the bacon, and this tank actually reminds me of a tank that's in War Thunder, the sponsor of today's video. War Thunder is the most vehicles, premium account, and a whole bunch more. But it's only available for a limited time, so what are you waiting for? Jump in and download War Thunder now. Thank you, War Thunder, for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel. That allows me to miss trophies like this next one. Man of the Vehicle is the trophy you get for saving this old man from being capped. They definitely killed him. Yeah, look, one, I didn't know it was a trophy, and two, I didn't think he was going to hit the James Bond on it. I'll come back and get this trophy later. What was that? But for this mission, I actually didn't end up dying that much. God damn it. In my defense, to be fair, you have to try to shoot out this helicopter.
Private equity is a great idea in theory. Funds take investor money, buy a bunch of fledgling or faltering companies, shuffle around their structure and leadership and operating model, grow their worth, then sell them a few years later for a profit. What's wrong with that? For example, do you remember Yahoo? In the early 2000s, it was an icon of the early internet. It was consistently worth more than Amazon and Apple combined. Its market cap reached a high watermark of over $125 billion. But today, it's known for what it isn't. After rejecting a $44.6 billion purchase bid by Microsoft in 2008, a decade of decline led to its eventual sale to Verizon for a humiliating $4.8 billion. Verizon then merged the company with AOL, previously bought for $4.4 billion, but after the downward trend continued, Verizon finally sold the combined company for just $5 billion. An enormous loss. The buyer was Apollo Global Management, a behemoth private equity firm previously headed by Leon Black until his $158 million payment to Jeffrey Epstein emerged in a meeting. Over the years, Apollo has owned and transformed companies like AT&T, Chuck E. Cheese's, Qdoba, and AMC Theaters, but this time, they believed there was value to be had in the beleaguered web services company, Yahoo. For their strategy to work, they needed a leader, and for that they turned to experienced businessman Jim Lanzone. Part of the reasoning was surely that this wouldn't be the first time Lanzone attempted to turn around a faltering internet business. He made a name for himself while working at Ask.com. The company started as Ask Jeeves, an early and promising competitor in the search engine space focused on natural language processing, much like today's AI-driven chatbots. Google, of course, won that competition, so the company pivoted its business model to center on questions and answers rather than search, and correspondingly rebranded as Ask.com. It was around then that Jim Lanzone was appointed CEO, and always overshadowed by the company's fall from its promising early days, Lanzone was recognized as having finished his term as CEO with the company on firmer footing, and is therefore credited for its continued survival. In the years that followed, Lanzone went on to lead CBS's digital business leading up to its massive merger with Viacom, and then was briefly CEO of Tinder in 2020, so Apollo believed he had all the experience for the job. This new leadership team, CEO Lanzone and investor Apollo, started by selling off extraneous yet valuable assets Yahoo had acquired through the years. They wanted to focus on the company's core rather than just acting as a collection of random revenue-creating resources that managed to survive in time. So the key assets, the comparatively strong and independently operated Yahoo Japan, were sold off to its other owner, SoftBank, for $1.6 billion. Then Edgecast, a streaming technology company that the former owner had grouped into the Yahoo AOL merger, was sold for $300 million. With just those two sales and the $2 billion they brought in, Apollo was reportedly able to more or less recoup what it had borrowed to finance the purchase of Yahoo in the first place. The key next step was facing reality. Recognizing that Yahoo was no longer truly a search engine, it was no longer an internet homepage, and it was hardly even an email provider. Really, Yahoo was simply just whatever still worked. And what worked was clear: Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Sports. Through the years, each had maintained and gained a reputation as the best places to go for investing in sports, news, and data. So to double down on success, they once again hired from experience. Ryan Spoon's time at ESPN and BetMGM gave him context into the fantasy sports audience that drives so much of Yahoo Sports' traffic, so he was tapped to be that division's president. Tapan Bhatt's time as chief product officer of NerdWallet informed his experience in the wants of the newest generation of retail investors, so he was appointed to general manager of Yahoo Finance. Structurally, within Yahoo, each of these core divisions was given a high degree of autonomy to build out unique product offerings for their specific customer bases. Yahoo Sports started work to bolster its sports betting offerings, including acquiring sector startup Wager in 2023. Yahoo Finance focused on growing its subscription-based offerings, and its Yahoo Finance Plus platform, offering advanced trading tools and data, is reported to now have more than 2 million customers and double-digit year-over-year growth. The details of what Apollo and this new leadership team are doing go on and on, but in short, Yahoo has gone through a transformation marked by cutting off its appendages, reinforcing its core, and it's working. While obscured by the lack of reporting requirements due to its private ownership, all indications suggest that the company is, while smaller, as healthy as it's been in decades, and the CEO has said that it's on the path towards IPO and is, quote, very profitable. However Apollo exits this investment, it will almost certainly yield them a tremendous return. And it'd be fair to argue they will have deserved it. They came in, took a risk, founded a leadership team, developed a viable strategy, and shepherded the company through a transformation. They took an obsolete institution and brought it back into relevancy. And this is exactly what the private equity industry would like you to believe private equity is. Structurally, private equity firms are not complicated. Their cores are the general partner. General partners typically know the right people. It is not an entry-level job. To take the example of a rather random, rather unremarkable firm, J.W. Childs Associates was founded by general partner John W. Childs after a long and successful stint at Thomas H. Lee Partners, founded by Thomas H. Lee. Thomas H. Lee founded his firm after a long stint at the First National Bank of Boston, where he rose to the rank of vice president. Other examples of private equity general partners include Mitt Romney of Bain Capital, who is also the 2012 Republican nominee for president, and Stephen Schwarzman of Blackstone, the 34th wealthiest person in the world. These connections are crucial thanks to step 2 in the process: raising money. Typically, general partners start by throwing in a couple million of their own money to set the stakes, then they'll go around pitching investors on why they're the best person to manage the investors' money. Often it has something to do with having particular experience in a particular industry that is particularly attractive for particular reasons. In the case of J.W. Childs, he likely went around arguing that he had a particular knack for investing in consumer food and beverage companies, since at his prior firm he had helped arrange the buyout of Snapple for $135 million in 1992, which his firm sold 2 years later for $1.7 billion after massive revenue growth. And he likely argued that food and beverage companies are great for investment, since people have to eat and drink, and therefore the sector is less subject to the cycles of the market than something like tech. This sort of stability is particularly attractive to the massive institutions that make up the core of private equity investors. In John W. Childs' case, insurance companies like Northwestern Mutual or employee pension funds like the Bayer Corporation Industry Trust. Individuals can theoretically invest in PE funds, but only if they hold enormous wealth. It varies dramatically, but many funds have minimum investments upwards of $25 billion. Meanwhile, the way private equity firms themselves make money is remarkably consistent. Just take 2% of it. 2% of all money each year is taken as a fee, regardless of whether or not the firm actually grows the investment. But then to incentivize returns, the firm also sets a benchmark, called a hurdle, that they're aiming to beat in year-over-year investment growth, 7%. Any money earned on top of that hurdle is then subject to a 20% fee that goes back to the firm. So, say if a fund was originally worth $100 million but grew to $110 million, $3 million would be subject to that performance fee, and so 20% of it, $600,000, would go back to the firm. In practice, what's earned from the 2% base fee is fairly consistent, since there are generally restrictions as to when investors can take money out of the fund, so the sum does not generally fluctuate rapidly. Therefore, firms typically earmark this base fee for covering basic operating costs like office rent and analysts' salaries. But how much is made from that 20% fee varies enormously. Some years it could be nothing, others it could be yacht money, especially since the gains from that fee are generally distributed primarily to the general partner. This is how general partners like John W. Childs become billionaires. And even better, the money from these fees is not considered traditional income by the American tax authorities. It's considered capital gains. Despite the fact that these earnings do not truly come from investments by the general partners themselves, the IRS treats them as if they do, and therefore only about 20% goes to taxes, versus the 37% they pay on traditional income. So, considering it's the primary source of their wealth, the general partner is massively incentivized to maximize their firm's gains, and to supercharge this to the next level, they almost all rely on one simple trick. They don't actually invest their own money, at least primarily. Now, if a $100 million fund bought a $100 million company and increased its value by 25%, they'd gain $25 million. But if a $100 million fund bought a $400 million company and increased its value by the same multiple, they'd gain $100 million. They'd 2x the fund's value. And believe it or not, a $100 million fund can buy a $400 million company as long as they have a friendly banker. This is what's referred to as a leveraged buyout. The fund puts in some of their money, but primarily relies on borrowed money to pay the seller, just like a home buyer with a mortgage. This magnifies the potential earnings, but in turn, of course, the potential losses. But it's worth considering what this does for the general partner. In a $100 million fund buying a $400 million company with 75% borrowed money, very small margins of growth can make all the difference for this one individual. With a 7% hurdle and 7.5% growth, 20% of the margin above 7% on that $400 million company would earn this individual $400,000. But if instead the company reached 7.75% growth, the general partner would earn $600,000. Because of this amplifying effect, every quarter of a percent growth, rather small difference, earns the general partner another $200,000 in income. It's also worth considering that it really doesn't matter exactly how this value is created. For every miraculous Yahoo turnaround story, there's a Marsh Supermarkets. At no point did Marsh reach the size or level of national ubiquity as Yahoo. If you aren't from Indiana or Western Ohio, you've likely never heard of Marsh Supermarkets. Yet, while confined to just 2 states, Marsh Supermarkets and its private equity takeover exemplifies a pattern that spans all 50. The first Marsh opened Keep, a small local grocer catering to specific local needs in Quincy, Indiana in 1931. The simple concept took. Weathering the Great Depression, then outlasting World War II, the budding Indiana institution began to expand. By the 1950s, there were 6 Marsh locations across the state. By 1952, there was a Marsh distribution center in Yorktown, Indiana, and by 1956, the store was expanding into Ohio. As demands changed in the 60s, the company adjusted. Marsh Foodliners became Marsh Supermarkets, growing in size to accommodate one-stop shopping. Diversifying as decades progressed, the company also established its own convenience store, the Village Pantry, its own bargain bin store, Millville Foods, and eventually purchased its own upscale grocers in O'Malia Foods and Arthur's Fresh Market. Blanketing urban and suburban Indiana and western Ohio, Marsh and Marsh Properties were a mainstay in the 90s and 2000s. And it was at about this time that Sun Capital became interested in the company. Today, there are 0 Marsh locations. In 2017, unable to keep up with rent payments and struggling to pay vendors, the company filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, closing every last location and liquidating all remaining assets. Like an empire spread too thin, Marsh had reached its territorial epoch before collapsing in on itself within just 2 decades, all on a timeline that rather neatly lines up the brand's time under Sun Capital's ownership. Now, Sun Capital Partners didn't instigate the regional grocer's fall from grace. Prior to the sale, Marsh had expensively failed to expand into Chicago, it had felt the revenue squeeze from encroaching box stores, and it watched Kroger's parade into its grocery market. In response, the company began to fall behind, failing to modernize its stores or products, backing out of sponsorship deals with the Indiana State Fair, and opening itself up to the possibility of selling. In an atmosphere of supermarket consolidation, though, there wasn't much interest in the struggling chain. Not until someone noticed in a footnote in the company's financial report that the company held a rather robust real estate portfolio. A $325 million purchase point then became more palatable, and in early 2006, Sun Capital jumped, paying $88 million in cash and assuming $237 million of debt. To Sun Capital, the deal was a can't-lose proposition. Either they'd turn around and flip a bloated business, or they'd sell the assets. Assets which, just in real estate, have been estimated to be worth $238 to $360 million. Under new ownership, things changed quickly. They compared management, they sold the company jet, and with the money saved, they renovated storefronts. Sales went up. Then came more management, but less the kind that would help bump sales. Almost immediately after Sun Capital took over, store locations went up for sale. This one for $750,000, this one for $2.15 million, and this one for $1.2 million. They'd stay operating as Marsh stores, but they'd now be paying a lease while Sun Capital would collect an unspecified commission on the sales. They even went as far as selling the company headquarters for a reported $28 million before then straddling the grocer with a 20-year lease, increasing at a 7% clip every 5 years. This maneuver is called a sale-leaseback, and it's quite common in private equity because, at least on paper, it makes sense for both parties. Marsh supermarket properties were no exception, as they could boost dividends or provide capital for another leveraged buyout for Sun Capital, while also helping the grocer to pay down debt and provide investment flexibility in the short term. But as for the consequences accompanying that long, escalating lease on company headquarters, along with cost-saving moves like carrying name-brand products, cutting staff, and contracting out more and more services, well, Sun Capital just hoped it wouldn't have to deal with them. As of early 2009, news bubbled to the surface that they were trying to sell the grocery chain. But to the dismay of Sun Capital, the new, leaner, streamlined Marsh just wouldn't sell. Ultimately, the new owner business boost was short-lasted, and in 2017, the grocer would go out of business with Sun Capital at the helm until the very day it filed for bankruptcy. To Sun Capital, failing to sell was a missed opportunity and a company overhaul that they would deem a loss, as the group ultimately came $500,000 short of recouping their investment into the chain grocery store. But even in a loss, the private equity firm won. They still collected their management fee each year of ownership, after all. They also collected their commission on sold assets as the company spun off its property at seemingly every turn. Really, the only loss was that they just didn't earn more. The same could be said about the consumers or employees, though. Deeply embedded in Indiana and Ohio's urban areas, Marsh locations provide healthier, fresher alternatives in areas at risk of falling into food deserts. Beyond nostalgia, residents who lost their local grocery and pharmacy were mad, confused, and lost to the anticipations of a long-time local institution. Then there were the people that worked for Marsh. According to Washington Post reporting, at the onset of Sun Capital's ownership, only one of 3 retirement plans was agreed to be fully funded by the new ownership. Surprisingly, the executives plan. As for store employees, their pension went underfunded by some $32 million, which fell not on Sun Capital to even out, but to the government insurer. As for warehouse workers, Marsh owed some $55 million at the time of bankruptcy to their pension, which was already struggling to pay full checks. Ultimately, Marsh Supermarkets as a business and Sun Capital as a private equity firm are relatively small potatoes, but their ill-fated 11 years speak to a larger pattern in American life. Private equity quietly maneuvers, takes over, reorganizes, and moves on, while consumers and employees grapple with the consequences. Private equity fixates on industries. Regional grocery chains like Marsh, casual restaurant chains like Red Lobster, odd-end industries like animal retail and veterinary care, and, most unnerving, the most consequential industry of them all, in healthcare. In most cases, only the sharpest-eyed consumer notices the subtle changes, but frequently enough, private equity's internal tinkering turns things sideways. The local market goes out of business, the menu items track upward in price, the understaffed and overpriced veterinary clinic's care drops in quality, the elderly home staff unintentionally neglects a call for help. All this happens in the name of efficiency gains, cost-cutting, and corporate streamlining. Bad outcomes not even private equity firms can deny. On average, headcount at public companies bought by private equity shrinks by 12% over the following 2 years, translating to thousands upon thousands of layoffs. PE-owned nursing homes see 11% higher mortality rates than the non-PE-owned counterparts, summing to a total of 1,000 excess deaths per year. Companies acquired by private equity firms through leveraged buyouts are found to be 10 times more likely to go bankrupt in the following 10 years than those that are not. Theories abound as to why a benign structure leads to such malignant results, but none are surprising. They all have to do with what happens when one shrinks a conglomeration of hundreds or thousands of people, their relations, their creativity, their capabilities, their faults, their everything down to a deluge of figures on a spreadsheet. The stories of a private equity firm going in, working on the human level, changing the fundamental culture of a company in a way that strengthens collaboration, creativity, innovation, towards the end of just creating a stronger, more competitive product for their customers, are tough to come by. The stories of a private equity firm going in, hiking pricing after their analysts told them that they could, hiring lobbyists to create more favorable legislative conditions, initiating mass layoffs for divisions that are not yet profitable, saddling companies with debt and complex financial maneuvers, shuffling assets around to create the illusion of transformation, sacrificing future potential for present-day returns, those stories and their calamitous human results go on and on. Exploitation is easy without emotion. When the person making decisions is the same person unlocking the door each morning, it is much more difficult for them to profit off of their employees' suffering. They have to face the consequences of their greed face to face, and that's uncomfortable. When the person making decisions is the boss and the vice president whose senior associate manages the associate who sits on the portfolio company board who appoints the CEO, whose direct report manages the division, whose vice president manages the regional manager, who oversees the branch manager that unlocks the door each morning, exploitation in the name of profit is easier. And those small number of individuals at the top, the general partners, have all the incentive in the world to exploit the margins. Because the compensation model, the industry is focused on growth at all costs. After all, without gangbusters growth, the person whose name is on the sign doesn't get paid. And finally, with a massive 20% of over-hurdle performance multiplied by leverage that paid out to the firm, tiny margins of difference, say outsourcing HR to a third-party firm that is less effective yet cheaper, make all the difference on the general partner's annual income. The incentives push towards brutality. Then this brutality is shielded by layers of bureaucracy. And finally, the U.S. government rewards the brutality by subjecting the gains from it to a lower tax rate. It's a great system, assuming you happen to be the general partner of an American private equity firm. As you may know, the latest fixation of the finance world, even beyond just private equity, is artificial intelligence. Many investors believe that it's as groundbreaking a technology as the internet, and so it's probably worth learning how it actually works. For that, I'd recommend our sponsor, Brilliant. They have a fantastic course on how large language models like ChatGPT work, which, surprisingly, I didn't find all that complicated to understand. But that's potentially thanks to Brilliant. They specialize in teaching complex STEM subjects by breaking them down into small chunks that they teach through intuitive principles and interactive exercises. As you keep going, they bring these small This video was made possible by ExpressVPN. Start browsing the web securely with 3 months free by going to expressvpn.com/wonderful. When you think of freight transport, the image in your head might include massive container ships or mile-long trains or enormous cargo planes, but more than each of those, the transportation method that carries the vast majority of the world's freight is trucks. In most places, it's not even close. By value, they carry 73% of the U.S.'s domestic freight. It is truly trucks that connect the world more than anything else. Trucking fills a lot of roles, from just daily deliveries to urban households, all the way to cross-country treks bringing goods from manufacturer to consumer. It is that form, though, long-haul over-the-road trucking, that is most elusive. These trucks are visible on the highways of any country, but the infrastructure supporting this transportation system hides in plain sight. When on the road, long-haul truckers live and work in their trucks. Of course, their job is centered around sitting behind the wheel, but the section behind that is where they live. Drivers are only allowed to drive a certain number of hours at a time. In the US, it's 11, in Europe, it's 9, and in the rest of the world, it's something similar to those two. Therefore, they need the facilities to live, rest, and recreate when off the road in those remaining hours of the day. Most trucks have a cab just large enough for a bed, TV, microwave, and a few other small appliances. They are typically intentionally minimalistic because there is a trade-off between the size and weight of the cab and how much freight can be hauled. This truly is a trade-off for the drivers mostly, as a big proportion of them in places like the U.S. usually own their truck themselves and work for companies on a freelance basis. That means they could decide to buy a rig with a larger, more comfortable cab, but that could make them less capable of hauling heavier loads, which means less money. Trucks are weight restricted, mostly to keep the roads in decent condition. The greater the weight, the greater the impact. In the U.S., this maximum weight varies widely. On most highways, it's 80,000 pounds or 36,000 kilograms, but this varies from state to state all the way up to 164,000 pounds or 75,000 kilograms in Michigan. Considering this variance, states will typically have weigh stations near their borders on major highways, as well as some spread out throughout the state. All trucks, except for some that have electronic systems allowing them to bypass, are required to pull off onto massive scales to ensure they're complying with the rules. Using this opportunity, though, many weigh stations have become far more technologically advanced to assure safety and compliance. For example, thermal cameras will take an image of the wheels to assure the brakes are working properly. If they're too cold, that can mean the brakes are not engaging. If they're too hot, that can mean they're engaging too much in comparison to the other brakes. So, the weight issue, though, is why the average rig looks just like this. A compact cab, just the bare minimum of comforts. The trade-off means that larger, extended sleepers are only common with, for example, long-haul moving trucks, which, due to the low weight and density of the carried goods, rarely have an issue with weight limits. So, given that most trucks look like this, with just the bare bones of comfort, most of the facilities truckers need are located in places where they sleep. Truck stops. These dot large countries like the U.S. with remarkable frequency, centered primarily along highways and other common trucking routes. They might look like large gas stations, but they offer far more. Truck cabs typically don't have bathrooms or showers, so they almost always have those. They also don't have laundry facilities, and truck stops often have those. Some will also have banks, barbers, chiropractors, dentists, dog groomers, and more. This is all because once truckers are on the road, they're in the system, and they can't really leave it until they're back at their origin. One can't just drive into the city and park to do some shopping in a semi-truck, or practically, and in some cases, leave. While truckers might travel more miles a year than anyone else, the world for them, while on the job, is limited to the roads, truck stops, and few other facilities.
I was so deep into that fight, and then obviously something had to be messed up. Something had to get messed up. Anyway, I have since I have a bunch of planes here that I could go into my favorite server. Okay, let's just pretty close. Anyway, I have a bunch I have a bunch of planes that I could fly. Probably tonight, I will probably have to do this MD-11 because guess what? Obviously, I'm going to have a FedEx one, probably two, one for my birthday, one for one just normal, and then obviously a UPS one as a tribute flight. And then, like what I was doing, I have to do my training stuff on this plane, and this plane. I was doing it on hill, but you know that I accidentally somehow got, I don't know. Anyway. I don't know. What else? Oh wait, the Beluga plane. Since I'm not trained on it, but I really wanted to do a tribute flight to it. So yeah, I could technically try to get certified on it right now. I just don't know how. Well, I just don't want that long of a flight. But I could do a shortened flight. Like that. That's only 47 minutes, or that's only 1 hour and 19 minutes. Wow. But I'll do that. I should have multiple training flights for the planes that I'm doing tonight. Possibly from hell. Actually, hell? To hell? No. But definitely from hell to hell. And I'll probably do it from hell to hell. Like on this plane. Which I should do. Possibly even night hell on all the planes that I'm going to train on tonight. So yeah. I just don't like that approach into the airport. Now to be fair, this better approach and take off.
At least catering to them. That's why services like dentists at truck stops are far from novelties. They're crucial fixtures of a life on the road. Truck drivers only make money when they're moving. Overwhelmingly, they are paid per mile, meaning the time during which they are legally mandated to rest is unpaid. Not only that, but time off actually loses money. The whole game is an economic puzzle. Trucks need power to run AC, heat, or electronics while stationary, all of which drivers typically need when they're stopped. Therefore, often, drivers leave their trucks idling overnight, which burns about 0.8 gallons or 3 liters of diesel per hour. At current prices, a 10-hour overnight stop would burn about $20 of diesel, which, multiplied by hundreds of grams per year per driver, is a significant cost and even greater environmental burden. In addition, this idling adds wear and tear to the engine and counts against a truck's warranty. Until recently, there really wasn't an alternative, except for sleeping without AC or heat, but under increased pressure to improve its environmental footprint, the trucking industry has implemented innovations such as auxiliary power units, smaller, more efficient generators, electric plug-ins at truck stops, or even ducts to install to windows when stopped to provide climate control. This economic calculation extends beyond stops. It also deals with optimizing the miles covered while following the laws. In the US, the rule is that one can drive up to 11 hours over an overall period of 14 hours, and then must rest for 10 hours. Assuming an average speed of 60 miles per hour, that means a truck can essentially travel 660 miles per day. Therefore, a cross-country trip from Los Angeles to New York would take about 4.5 days. The drivers themselves are paid per mile, so all they want to do is maximize their speed during the 11 hours of daily driving time. The consumer, though, whoever's paying for the transport of the product in the bag, cares about how fast it gets to them overall. Therefore, truckers have devised a system to move freight faster. The rules just say that drivers have to rest for 10 hours in their cab. It doesn't say that the trucks have to be stationary. Drivers will therefore team up so that while one drives, the other sleeps, and vice versa. A team of drivers, which is often made up of a married couple, can therefore drive 22 hours per day, covering 1,320 miles. That means that they could make a Los Angeles to New York trip in just 2 days. Consumers will pay a premium for the speed, and therefore trucking companies will pay more per mile. In addition, having less stop time means that the truck, which costs quite a lot, is being used more efficiently. This team system is all around a win for everyone, assuming one can find a pair of people that will tolerate spending their lives cooped up in a truck cabin together. Truckers almost certainly are a dying breed. The future of freight transport will undoubtedly center around self-driving trucks, and the technology for these is very close to ready for prime time. Right now, multiple companies are at the point where their trucks are traveling autonomously, with drivers behind the wheel to intervene if needed. These are essentially autopilot systems, similar to Tesla's, that aid the driver and reduce fatigue. Soon though, with more proven technology and legal authority to do so, this will likely advance to autonomous convoys. In this system, One driver would sit behind the wheel of a lead truck, which might also drive autonomously, and then a series of autonomous humanless trucks would follow behind. This way, there is still a human that can assist with mechanical issues or unforeseen road conditions, but the freight-to-driver ratio increases dramatically. This will, of course, reduce the number of truckers needed, but then, after this phase, the industry will undoubtedly advance to fully autonomous trucks. At first, this will likely just be on dedicated routes. For example, a company might deploy these on uncomplicated routes from one warehouse to another, both being close to a highway. Autonomous driving on highways is relatively easy since road conditions are standardized and predictable. Autonomous city driving is much more complicated, so human drivers might still be needed for the start and end of journeys. What fully autonomous driving could do, though, is allow a truck to continue moving on the highway while a driver rests in the back, allowing essentially continuous driving without having to deal with working hour limits. This, along with a convoy system, could increase the cost efficiency of trucking dramatically, as the human drivers represent a significant cost. An average trucker's pay is about 35 cents per mile, meaning that cutting out that cost entirely would reduce the cost of a Los Angeles to New York trip, for example, by almost $1,000. It is for this reason why so many companies are pursuing autonomous trucks. Of course, the other major cost in trucking is fuel, so companies are also trying to innovate in that space. Concurrent to the deployment of autonomous trucks is a likely shift into the use of electric trucks. Tesla, for example, is developing its own semi-truck. They claim its energy consumption will be about 2 kilowatt hours per mile. The US's average energy cost is about 10 cents per kilowatt hour, which translates to an energy cost of about 20 cents per mile. Typical internal combustion semi-trucks have an efficiency of about 6 miles per gallon, so at current diesel prices, that would translate to a cost of about 40 cents per mile. Having a trucking company's energy prices is certainly an intriguing proposition, which is why many consider the Tesla Semi so promising. At those prices, if a truck goes driverless, meaning no salary costs, the variable cost of a cross-country Los Angeles to New York run would be just $550. To be able to haul tens of thousands of pounds of goods from door to door across the country for just hundreds of dollars would result in a paradigm shift in the freight world. There are certainly disadvantages, such as the high battery pack weight that reduces cargo capacity, but it is clear that electric trucks will play some role in the industry regardless in the future. This role will likely be concentrated in shorter routes rather than long-haul ones, but this is still a significant enough subset of the industry that electric trucks have the potential for significant disruption. Right now, there is a strange duality where truckers are so crucial to the running of a modern economy that the world is working to replace them. We can't live without them right now, so we're finding a way to. In the future, though, the job of a trucker will undoubtedly be another victim of an increasingly modernized world. Another aspect of an increasingly modernized world is clearly more people working from home, and with that, it's more important than ever to be sure that you're using the internet securely. ExpressVPN can play a crucial component in that for you. They assure that 100% of the data transferred between your device and the internet is encrypted, therefore providing a layer of protection for everything you do online. This is important because, for example, in the US, internet service providers can legally sell your data to ad companies, and in the UK and Australia, they keep logs of your internet activity for years. In addition, you can route your traffic through any country to be extra sure it's safe against government surveillance, or even just to get access to a bigger selection of online entertainment. I've personally used ExpressVPN for years, far before they offered to sponsor the channel, and have found that their simplicity and reliability makes them definitively the best VPN. The best bit is, you can try ExpressVPN with 3 months free by going to expressvpn.com/Wendover, and you'll be supporting the channel while you're at it.
You know what's funny? Russia sold so...
Buzzer at the Slam Dunk Savings Event at Hillview Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram. Come see our MVP lineup of vehicles. Time is ticking on these lonely suffers. Get more for your trade because Hillview wants what you drive.
This video was made possible by CuriosityStream. Watch an exclusive companion video to this on Nebula, which you can access by signing up for the CuriosityStream Nebula Bundle deal for $15 a year at curiositystream.com/Wendover. With any disruptive technology, there's a tipping point. There is a point in time when its path towards market dominance is a certainty. Now, electric vehicles are almost certainly a disruptive technology. They're almost certainly a technology that will, with time, become dominant over their predecessor. In this case, the predecessor is the internal combustion car that you, yourself, almost certainly use. Chances are, though, when asked, you'd say that your next car will not be electric, and you're right. The average consumer, according to surveys, would not even consider purchasing an electric vehicle, demonstrating that the technology is not yet at the tipping point where it's on a certain path towards market dominance. But again, that path is almost certain. EVs are not there yet. Right now, they're too expensive, too short range, and too slow to charge, but they're close. In fact, research can quantify just how close they are. It's been shown that the tipping point price for EVs, the price that will lead to mainstream adoption and eventual disruption, is $36,000. Taking a look at the prices of the base models of 3 of the world's best-selling electric vehicles, they're already roughly there, so we know that that's not what's holding mass market consumers back. What also matters is range. Consumers say they need 291 miles or 469 kilometers of it before the cars can go mass market. 2 of the best-selling EVs, the Tesla Model 3 and the Chevy Volt EV, are not far from that, while the Nissan Leaf lags behind. Range and cost are closely linked, and you can essentially trade one off for the other, as the battery is the single largest cost of an EV. That's why the industry is so focused on innovating and scaling to lower the component cost of EV batteries, and it's working. In 2013, the average price per kilowatt hour of an EV battery was $668, meaning the base model Tesla Model 3's 50 kilowatt hour battery would cost $22,400, 2/3 of what the vehicle sells for. Nowadays, the average price per kilowatt hour is all the way down to $137, meaning that same battery pack would cost just $6,850, and this price per kilowatt hour is expected to lower to $100 by 2023. It's getting more and more possible for manufacturers to sell an EV for the magic $36,000 price with the magic 291-mile range. While EVs are not quite there yet, they're really not far and will be there in the next few years. So, range is not what's significantly holding mass market consumers back, and it won't be at all within a few years. What is, though, is charging. The research shows that consumers want to be able to charge their cars from empty to full in 31 minutes, and that's the magic number for mass market adoption. With this, current $36,000 EVs just aren't yet there. The base model Chevy Volt EV can't even fast charge. It doesn't have the technology for it. And even the upgraded, more expensive model that does allow for fast charging can only get to 39% state of charge in 31 minutes. The Nissan Leaf does a little better, attaining 62% state of charge in 31 minutes. While the base model Tesla Model 3 was the best, with its ability to fill its battery to 83% in the most ideal conditions using the fastest models of Tesla superchargers, but that would only give it 196 miles or 315 kilometers of range, again in the most ideal conditions. In colder weather, both that charging time would be greater and that range would be less. So, it's currently possible to get an EV with just about what the mass market requires for cost and range, but reaching that charging time, that's just a lot tougher. What this research can lead us to conclude is that the largest barrier right now to mass market EV adoption is, in fact, the charging network. The tipping point just will not happen without widespread fast charging, but widespread fast charging is just difficult because of the very way our electric grid works. You see, back in the 1880s, Thomas Edison, with his direct current electric system, battled it out with George Westinghouse and his alternating current system. As the names suggest, direct current electricity flows consistently and unidirectionally, while alternating current oscillates in magnitude and rapidly changes direction. The exact details of how each works isn't that important in this context, but what is to know that, for a variety of reasons, AC Power 1 is now the standard for power grids, but there are certain technologies that still need DC power. The most widespread example of that is batteries. You cannot charge a battery using AC power. That's why you don't plug your smartphone directly into an outlet. You plug it into a power brick that plugs into an outlet, and that power brick is an AC to DC converter. A standard iPhone charging inverter needs 5 watts of electricity, which is plenty enough to charge the phone's 11 watt-hour battery in a few hours. A base model Tesla Model 3, meanwhile, has a 50 kilowatt-hour battery, 4,500 times larger. Therefore, it needs a much higher wattage power inverter to charge with any speed. It solves this in 2 ways. On board that Model 3 is a 7.7 kilowatt inverter that can take AC power from common sources, like a standard wall outlet, and convert it into DC power to charge the battery. At its max rate, this can charge the car fully in under 10 hours, and has the advantage of allowing consumers to charge using regular wall plugs or by installing relatively inexpensive chargers on existing domestic AC electric circuits. The disadvantage, though, is that while 7.7 kilowatts is plenty fast enough for regular overnight at-home charging, it's not fast enough to compete with the convenience of filling up an internal combustion car at the gas station. It's not fast enough if you're on a long-distance trip and need to be able to gain hundreds of miles of range in a matter of minutes. So, if you need more electricity faster, you need a higher wattage inverter. To be able to take a Tesla Model 3 from almost empty to almost full in 30 minutes, you want between 120 and 250 kilowatts. The problem, though, is that a 250 kilowatt inverter costs, at least in this case, $57,600 and is about the size of a very large fridge. It's not exactly practical to have this as an internal component of the car. So, for faster charging, one needs to offboard the inversion process. That's exactly what a DC fast charger does. It supplies a huge quantity of DC power to the car, which bypasses the onboard inverter and charges the battery directly.
This is one of the
Between the inverter, the charger, and all the other equipment needed for a fast charging station, the cost and size is not insignificant. One of the more popular models, the ChargePoint Express 250, which can charge a single car at a somewhat slow 62.5 kilowatts, sells for $40,800, and that's before installation. Meanwhile, while it's tough to get an exact figure, industry experts estimate it costs Tesla about $250,000 to build an average supercharging station with 6 stalls delivering 120 to 150 kilowatts each, or its closest equivalent, the stations by Volkswagen's Electrify America, are estimated to cost $350,000. But here's something counterintuitive. Using a 250 kilowatt charger versus a 150 kilowatt one doesn't really impact how fast you charge. Batteries charge slower the more full they are, so the first 20% will pass far faster than the last 10%. In the context of EV charging, this means that quite quickly into the charge, the speed is impacted not by how much power the station is putting out, but by how much electricity the battery can accept. So, it's actually faster to charge to 50%, drive until empty, charge to 50%, and drive until empty again, than charging to 100% and driving to empty. A Tesla Model 3 can go from 0 to 50% charge in 15 minutes on a 250 kilowatt charger, and 17 minutes on a 150 kilowatt charger, giving it enough range to drive at least 100 miles and 160 kilometers, while charging from 50% to 90% would take an additional 27 minutes in both cases. So, combining 2 charges from empty to 50% in 2 stops, you could effectively reach the tipping point speed of 100% charge in 31 minutes with existing 250 kilowatt chargers. Therefore, what the industry needs is not faster chargers, but more chargers, which is hugely difficult given the enormous cost of fast chargers. The average American lives 4 minutes away from a gas station. Meanwhile, the same average American
Vietnam.
The buzzer at the Slam Dunk Savings event. Come see our MVP lineup of vehicles.
So I just saw it.
Guys, we are witnessing history right now. The Randall Perkinator account has deleted every
deal sales event.
Try that 5. It's juicy. A soft gum.
American lives 31 minutes away from their nearest Tesla supercharger. Currently, there are 976 supercharging stations in the U.S., each of which have anywhere between 2 and 56 individual chargers. In order to match the 4-minute average of gas stations, Tesla would need to build an additional 31,251 supercharging stations. At their $250,000 per station cost, that would cost the company some $7.8 billion, or roughly 10 times their total annual profits from 2020. In addition, only some 750,000 Teslas ever have been sold in the US, meaning to have fast charging stations as accessible as gas stations, the company would need to install a $250,000 supercharging station for every 23 cars it had on the road. Quite obviously, that's not feasible, as the stations would never break even with such infrequent use, and that's the exact problem. You need the infrastructure to sell the cars, but you can't build the infrastructure until you sell the cars. It is the classic chicken and the egg problem. There might, however, be a solution. According to federal government data, there are some 3,845 non-Tesla DC fast chargers in the US, the vast majority of which could charge a Model 3 within an hour, assuming it could connect. Just as there was a format war in the 1880s between DC and AC power, there is now a war of charging standards. Take the example of Salina, Kansas, a small city off of Interstate 70, which most people only visit to refuel or, in this case, recharge. This supercharger uses Tesla's proprietary plug, this Electrify America station uses CCS and CHAdeMO plugs, and this hotel's charger uses a J1772 plug. There are 4 different plug types in one small city. Now, a Tesla could use the Tesla charger and the J1772 charger with an included adapter, but it could only use the CHAdeMO charger with a speed-limited $540 adapter, and it couldn't use the CCS charger at all, as there's no adapter for that plug type. Meanwhile, a Chevy Volt EV wouldn't be able to use the Tesla or CHAdeMO chargers at all, as there are no adapters for either to its CCS plug. That means that, to accommodate every vehicle type, DC fast chargers need to have 3 different plug types, which, overwhelmingly, they just don't. Especially along interstate highways, there are the Tesla stations, and there are the combo CHAdeMO and CCS stations. Just like Edison and Westinghouse delayed more widespread adoption of electric power by competing against each other in these same areas with their different incompatible AC and DC standards, different stakeholders in the electric vehicle market are competing against each other in the US to create redundant, largely incompatible networks. But that's not happening everywhere. You see, in Europe, CCS is the standard. The European Union has a directive which means that many member states, by law, require that public DC fast chargers include a CCS plug. Therefore, in the EU and neighboring countries like the UK, Norway, and Switzerland, CCS is now de facto or de jure charging standard. That forced Tesla's hand to the point that in 2018, it retrofitted all its existing superchargers with CCS plugs, switched its Model 3s to CCS, and released an adapter allowing its other models to use CCS chargers. All told, this means that pretty much any car in Europe can use pretty much any DC fast charger. That, combined with Europe's higher population density, has helped ensure that the density and coverage of DC fast chargers is much greater than in the US, despite the fact that EV ownership per capita is actually higher in the US than Europe as a whole, although certain European countries far eclipse the US rate. Europe is almost identical in size to the US, it has a very similar number of electric cars overall, but it has double the number of DC fast charging stations. In Germany, the furthest you can seemingly get from a DC fast charger is here in Winterthur.
From this small ski town, the nearest fast charger is about 30 miles or 50 kilometers away in Marvin. Meanwhile, in the US, if you wanted to drive directly from Dallas to Denver, two major American cities, using a base model Tesla Model 3, you just couldn't. There's a 226-mile or 363-kilometer stretch with no DC fast charger between Amarillo, Texas and Trinidad, Colorado, which, given the elevation gain, the car would not make. While Tesla is plugging this gap soon with a new charger in Clayton, New Mexico, that won't solve the problem for every single other EV on the market, since the charging systems are not compatible. Simply put, mass market consumers are not going to buy cars that can't drive from Dallas to Denver. What Europe has that the US does not is coordinated government plans. Germany's federal government, for example, builds its own charging stations in addition to offering strong incentives for private companies to do so as well. Meanwhile, the federal government in the US has done very little to incentivize fast charger construction and certainly does not have a network of its own. Certain states, such as Oklahoma or Colorado, do have strong coordinated government programs to build fast charging infrastructure, meaning even shorter-range EVs can drive essentially anywhere in each state without encountering a fast charger gap. But the problem is that EV drivers from Colorado or Oklahoma will eventually want to drive through Kansas, or Nebraska, or Wyoming, or other states that do not have a coordinated plan. The US federal government clearly wants people to buy EVs because it offers hefty tax credits to those who do so, but people are not going to buy EVs without the charging infrastructure to support it. EVs are comparable in cost to internal combustion cars, their range is about what consumers demand, but what's lagging behind is that charging infrastructure. This isn't even an exclusively American problem. In Australia, one can't drive from Perth to Sydney, the country's fourth and first most populous cities, in an EV due to a massive charging gap, while in Russia, despite similar incentives for EV purchases, there are a total of 24 DC fast chargers in the entire country. Of course, some will always debate whether governments should be incentivizing electric vehicles at all, but regardless of that, they are. It's tough to find a developed country that does not have some tax or other monetary incentive for EV ownership. The point is that they're incentivizing the wrong way. EVs are very, very close to reaching the tipping point criteria for everything but charging. Cost is not standing in the way, technology is not standing in the way, infrastructure is. So governments are putting the cart before the horse. Individual companies cannot reach the required scale, and even if they did, as the format war in the US proves, it probably wouldn't be the kind of scale that the mass market consumer demands. Individual car companies can deal with making individual electric vehicles attractive to consumers. The government doesn't need to worry about that. But infrastructure, that's the government's job. Governments run or regulate roads and bridges, and tunnels and sidewalks, railways, airports, electric grids, dams, sewers, water supply networks, and even fuel supply systems. Because they are infrastructure, and infrastructure is essential. So the only question is, why not charge? So, as you might have guessed by now, I own an electric vehicle, so I took it to my local Tesla supercharger to make a companion video to this, where I give a super detailed, super nerdy explanation of exactly how a supercharger works from a technical perspective. You can find that companion video exclusively on Nebula, which, as you probably know by now, is home to tons of exclusive ad-free content from tons of your favorite educational creators. The reason we can put companion videos like this there is because of the way Nebula works. It doesn't have an algorithm to punish us when we make something different from our normal stuff, and the direct subscriptions from users help fund both these and other projects, like our many Nebula originals. If you're interested in watching all this exclusive content, plus supporting loads of independent educational creators, you can sign up using the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle. Basically, you go to curiositystream.com/Windover, sign up for any subscription, but I suggest the yearly one since it's on sale for less than $15 a year right now, and then you have access to both streaming sites. CuriosityStream itself has great stuff too from more established names like Richard Hammond of Top Gear and Grand Tour, who made a series about how weather actually works by going into extreme weather. All told, CuriosityStream is great thanks to their seemingly endless library of top quality stuff, and Nebula is great thanks to its exclusive, early, and ad-free videos from the educational creators you already know and love. CuriosityStream and Nebula together is greater than great though, because it's only $15 a year with the current sale at curiositystream.com/Wendover.
Style and substance. In the GMC Sierra, we'll get it to.
There's trips you gotta take, and the ones you wanna take. And with you, save your way. Well, partner, they ain't so far away. Save now with an instant discount. For later, and make it count. Only at hotels.com.
Oh! Oh my god.
Wait, as soon as I slammed
Nah,
that
I
ball
don't think I
forward,
need it. I don't think I need it though.
a lot of those
Nah.
worries and fears just kind of like wash away.
The F-35 Bravo, a fifth-generation supersonic stealth fighter jet flown by the United States Marine Corps. It also just so happens to be one of the few U.S. fighter jets in history with the ability to hover. The aircraft was designed for short takeoff and vertical landing, something you'll hear referred to as STOVL. With the help of a vertical lifting fan that functions like a miniature helicopter, the F-35B can take off from small amphibious assault ships and return to land vertically.
We can bring that aircraft from a touchdown to a full stop in a few hundred feet.
It's a fascinating design and one that I've never fully understood, until today. I'm here on the coast of South Carolina at Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, where we'll have the opportunity to sit down with an F-35 pilot one-on-one and witness something I've been looking forward to seeing for a long time. The F-35 Bravo putting on a full flight demonstration, including a first-hand look at what this aircraft is known for, its iconic hover. So you've been flying the F-35 for over 7 years now. Can you take us back to your very first time flying the F-35B, strapping in, taking off? What was that like?
Currently today, in the syllabus that we teach our students, there's a significant amount of sims that you do first. So that first day, obviously going to be some nerves, but when you strap into the jet, you've already started it before, so that stress is gone. You get on the runway, you jam to the throttle, and although now during this year, a little hot, the carryover from the jet is actually pretty good. And it's as soon as, I mean, for me, as soon as I slam that throttle forward, a lot of those worries and fears just kind of like wash away.
You ever just, when you're flying, turn around, look over your shoulder, see this alien spacecraft looking airplane behind you and be like, this is the coolest job in the world?
I had a leader a few years back give me a sound piece of advice that said you don't have fears like some aircraft do. You say, hey man, like every time you fly, try to take a moment at some point to kind of think about what you're doing and realize what a gift it is and how lucky you are to do it.
Is there one thing about this airplane that every time you see it or get to use it, it just blows your mind?
A lot of the workings of it and how we do the thing, we've been trained to do that. And I'm not going to say that it's become commonplace, but you don't necessarily focus on that as much. For me, it's just the fifth generation fighters, they look so futuristic on the flight line that every time you walk to one, every time you're in one, you always just feel that. Especially when we've got our fourth generation F-18s on the flight line, it always kind of jumps out at you what you're flying.
Now, for those unfamiliar with the F-35, the aircraft comes in 3 different variants, each one designed for a unique role. The F-35 Alpha is designed for air-to-air combat, taking off and landing on conventional runways. The F-35 Charlie is optimized for aircraft carriers and features a larger overall wing design needed for slower approach speeds. And finally, the F-35 Bravo, with its massive lifting fan installed just behind the cockpit, allows the aircraft to perform short takeoffs and vertical landings, which include the iconic hover.
we can take an aircraft that weighs about 33,500 pounds, and we can bring that aircraft to a dead hover. Additionally, we can take off in a shorter distance of approximately fully loaded, let's call it 800 to 1,000 feet, depending on combat load environmentals. And we can, one, land vertically, and then two, we talk about expeditionary ops, flying off of roads, hastily constructed landing mats designed for military aircraft. We can bring that aircraft from a touchdown to a full stop in a few hundred feet. So really good to see unique capability that the other variants do not have.
So does the Bravo variant that you guys fly in the Marine Corps, does that have less maneuverability from the Alpha and the Charlie?
The biggest hit we take is in our low due to the lift band's positioning within the aircraft and our CG. We're only able to go up to that 7G limit. Even if you're dogfighting, the amount of time you live in that load-limited regime at the maximum of your G that you're able to sustain, you're going to be bleeding energy so quickly that it's not where you're going to spend the preponderance of your time in the dogfight. The short answer, yes, we do take a hit. I don't think it's necessarily as severe of a hit as both consider it to be.
What I didn't know until I was researching this is that the Bravo variant and the Charlie variant, they don't have an internal gun installed, right? Only the Air Force version does. Why is that?
With the F-35B, the reason we don't have a gun is due to the lift fan, due to the extra space we require for our fuel tanks and for the lift fan that sits right behind the pilot. What we have instead is we have a gun pod. So the gun pod was supposed to rise from the carrier gun pod, which is a 25mm cannon, like a 4-barrel weapon system. It straps on to the center line of the aircraft. We don't have it always on our side. We don't have it always coming with us, but it means that should the mission require it, then we can really quickly put it on the aircraft, load it up, and they can get us down there.
So something I always thought was cool. I mean, you guys can launch off of ships less than 1,000 feet long. What's that like?
When it comes to the way that we operate off ships, believe it or not, we actually use some of the advanced functionality of the F-35B. And from our landing signals officer, we will calculate exactly how much roll you need on the flight deck of that ship, and we will set ourselves up at these lines. So it's into the deck of the ship to launch the exact amount of distance we need. We calculate that exact number we need to launch from, put it into the aircraft, and we conduct an automatic stow. So the aircraft itself, we get everything primed up, ready to go, hands on the controls, but once you let your feet off the brake and push the throttle forward, the jet itself is calculating that distance down and then it executes the rotation for you. Ultimately, you learn to trust that aircraft. That aircraft is the only way you're going to leave that ship, the only way you're going to.
Now, I mentioned earlier that the F-35 Bravo is one of only 2 U.S. fighter jets in history with the ability to hover. The other, the iconic AV-8B Harrier. The Marine Corps has been flying the Harrier since 1985, and while it's still flying today, its days are numbered. And in the coming years, the Marine Corps will fully transition over to the F-35 Bravo. Now, with 2 aircraft of completely different generations, yet overlapping mission sets, I was curious to learn about their similarities and differences. And luckily enough, I was able to catch up with a former Harrier pilot, now stationed here at Marine Corps Air Station Buford flying F-35s, to ask him
Surprise, motherfucker!
So to set the scene in the simplest way possible, can you sort of explain how the hovering system works on the F-35 Bravo?
Yeah, two things. So at the heart of it, we've got the lift fan system, right? So the lift fan is right behind the cockpit there, right behind the pilot. And that lift fan is physically connected via drive shaft and clutch to the actual fuel burning engine. So when I hit the button in the jet, the hook stowable button, and I convert into mode 4, which is stowable, that all the doors open up on top and bottom. That clutch engages and the main engine energizes the lift fan. So that provides lift at the forward edge of the aircraft. On the rear edge of the aircraft, we've got the 3GSM, 3-burning swivel nozzle, and that allows the exhaust from the engine to pivot down and point up again. So you have 2 points of lift, one in the front, one in the back, and that provides sort of capability for the aircraft. Additionally, on the wingtip, or about halfway out on the wings, you have 2 roll posts, and that provides that lateral stability left and right for management and balance.
So starting off flying a platform like the Harrier, and then moving on to something like the F-35, what are some of the main differences that stick out to you?
Sure. So it's a world of difference. So the Harrier, everything in that aircraft is mechanically linked. So everything I'm touching in the aircraft, throttle, the nozzle lever, the stick, and the pedals, is mechanically linked to those actuators. So when we're in the hover in the Harrier, you have RCS ducts, or reactionary control system ducts, that vent air from the engine to the wingtips, nose, and tail, and that provides my lateral and yaw and pitch while in the hover. And again, like I said, that's directly connected to my stick in the Harrier, and there's a little bit of stability augmentation that helps me maintain
for the right path after high school or a fresh start? Westmoreland County Community College invites you.
In the near future, the world is on the edge of chaos, and warfare evolves into a high-tech, privatized industry dominated by advanced weaponry and powerful corporations. Among them stands Atlas, a private military company led by a man with great ambition. This is the story of Call of Duty: Advanced Warfare.
You treat your men like you would your own beloved sons, and they'll follow you into the deepest valley.
Our story begins in the year 2054, and it follows Private John Mitchell, who is fresh off enlistment alongside his best friend Will Irons. The two are part of the United States Marine Corps, and their first deployment is to Seoul, Korea. The Marines are there to help a neighboring country, North Korea.
We were brothers in arms. No matter how bad it got, I can always count on him to keep me in line. Cheer up, Mitchell. Can't be all that bad.
It's just finally starting to sink in.
This is what we signed up for.
Well, the old man was a leatherneck, so I didn't really have much of a choice.
Yeah? I joined up because of the old man, too. More just to get away from him.
I can't get much further away than this.
All right. Listen up. We have our orders. Inserting an LZ Epsilon. Down and dirty, just like we taught you. Everybody know what's going on? Everybody know what's going on? Everybody ready?
The team would enter via dropped pods. Alongside them are Sergeant McCormack and Private Jackson. The attack on Seoul is massive, and the team is separated from the other Marines. While passing through a building, the Marines are intercepted by an Atlas rescue team, led by one of the contractors, including Atlas and his private military company, global threat. The CEO, the father of Will Irons, who had an opportunity to work for his father, but opted to serve his country rather than God. The Marines
Look, it took roughly 7 minutes to download all of BF6 and the Warzone Killer with it. The only bad thing is you need a minimum of 100 gigabytes, and if you don't have that in your console storage, well, you gotta delete games. Games like COD are nearly 300 gigabytes. Thankfully, I don't have to...
Oh, shit. They're up to my arms. Don't worry about that timer. One more time. Pull! Lift it off. Gotta go now. We're outside. You gotta jump now.
This math problem?
We are America, second to none, and we own the finish line.
Will died, and Mitchell lost his left arm. The aftermath of the attack on Korea was not a pretty. Mitchell would be discharged from the Marines, and he would attend Will's funeral, where he would meet Jonathan Irons. Here, Irons offers Mitchell a second chance, an opportunity to make a difference and serve once more.
You take care of all. You wait a minute, excuse me, Private Mitchell.
I'm Jonathan Irons. I'm Will's father.
Mr. Irons, I'm sorry for your loss, sir.
I'm sure you are, Sergeant.
I just made a simple...
Private Mitchell, you were Will's best friend. You both paid too high a price for your country.
It was an unfortunate tragedy.
It was more than unfortunate, Sergeant. It was unnecessary. Son, I want to offer you a second.
Watch, your word is pseudo-hypoparathyroidism.
I'm aware of his injuries, Sergeant. At Atlas, we have prestige 20 years beyond anything the military could offer. We are told to go
Shit out of him.
You deserve to fight for the military with success.
I'm gonna bomb the shit out of him. I'm gonna bomb the shit out of him.
The B-2 Spirit, also known as the Stealth Bomber,
Sergeant.
is one of the most advanced and iconic aircraft ever built. It was developed by
Mitchell received a high-tech prosthetic arm from Atlas, and he would undergo training in the facility located in Virginia. Mitchell's first simulation would be to save the President of the United States, and the mission almost went without a hitch until his prosthetic arm malfunctioned. Mitchell would be sent to take the arm and redo the simulation. He would pass, and Mitchell would be assigned to the Air Squad. 3 months after being integrated into Atlas, Mitchell would head to Lagos, Nigeria, with the squad to rescue the Nigerian Prime Minister, who was being held captive by a global terrorist organization known as the KVA. The KVA shared anti-Western and anti-technology views. They were a dangerous paramilitary group led by Joseph Chekdesi, aka Hades. The team would be assisted by local forces, and they would move to attack Haiti and rescue the Prime Minister. During this, Hades would kill one of the hostages before the team arrived, but once they secured the Prime Minister, Hades would escape, and it would be revealed that the kidnapping was a ruse. Hades would after a technologist who was in the area. Mitchell and the team pursued the KVA vehicle carrying the technology.